everybody, it's Clare again. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of all time in a few genres. And today is Saturday, so I don't have tea, something a little bit stronger. So I don't know how this will go because that was not my first sip of that. I was inspired to do this video by Amy Poole, who did also an all-time favorites video that I will link below, and I'm really excited because who doesn't love to talk about their all-time favorite books? Side note, this video might look a little bit different than my last few because I couldn't be bothered to clear off my bed, and so I am sitting on the ground in the corner of my room. Alright, let's begin. I'm going to start with my favorite young adult books of all time. So I have a lot of young adult books that I really love, but I'm going to talk about like my absolute classic favorite and then my most recent favorite. So my absolute classic favorite, this is a book that really got me into reading when I read it for the first time as like a freshman in high school, and I literally carried it in my book bag probably for 3 years straight. So it's Just Listen by Sarah Dessen, the queen of YA in my heart, at least. This is actually my original copy. I have never repurchased this book, and so it has all the doodles and notes from before I, started to respect my books. So like I outlined all the titles and filled in her name, and the back has like these horrific doodles, and I like literally marked it up all on the inside with all the quotes that I liked. I highlighted or underlined because I actually wrote a book report on this book in my sophomore year of high school. So I'm intimately familiar with this book, and I hadn't read it in like 4 years. And recently I went back and listened to it as an audiobook, and yes, it still has a place in my heart. I don't know that I should be revisiting books that I really loved because I fear that I really loved them because of that time, and that when I reread them, I'm not gonna like them as much. But I listened to this one and I've read it tons of times, and yeah, I still like it. I think it's a really great YA. My recent young adult favorite is not going to come as a surprise because this was all over BookTube and still is, I think. I started this book at like 9 p.m. one night and read it for like 3 hours, and then I was like, oh my god, I gotta go to bed, I really have to because I have to go to work the next morning. And then I woke up at like 5 a.m. and I was like, well, I'm already awake, I might as well keep going. And so I picked this back up, and so I started it at 9 p.m. one night and then finished it by 8 a.m. the next day before I had to go to work, and I just breezed right through it. I don't know if returning to this book would ever be a good idea for me, but it really did make me like the first, like Just Listen. It really did like renew my spirit when it came to reading. Like I was in a slump and this got me out of it, and I love it for that. I hope someday that I go back to it, but I'm also kind of afraid to in case I don't love it as much. Next I'm going to talk about fiction and literature, not of the young adult genre, but of the regular adult genre, and I have 5 books to talk about, but I only have 4 of them here with me. So the one that I don't have with me is A Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, and I love that book. I love Junot Diaz in general, and so it's such a brilliant, well-constructed book. So yes, I love The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. That's an amazing book that I highly recommend. He also has a good collection of short stories called This Is How You Lose Her, which is not one of my favorite collections of short stories, but is also amazing. Okay, next. This is a book that I don't see a lot on BookTube, but it's amazing, it's a classic, it's awesome, and I am not one who really likes classics. I know that it's kind of blasphemous to say that in the book-loving community, but I really like contemporary novels and collections, and so this is, I think, the only classic you'll find on my favorites shelf. It's The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This book really speaks to my heart. It's a book that connected to me so much that I'm even having trouble talking about it now. It's so fantastic. So it's about a journey, but the point isn't the main character's travels or the people that he meets. The message really flows through the book really smoothly. It just feels like there are some really important deep and intimate truths that are told in this book that I don't find in other books, and then when I read this I feel like I'm understanding something new, and that's really special. Really special to me, something that I love and something I'm really grateful for. I've read this book many times. My mom also loved this book. She reads it in Spanish though. This is a really incredible book. The next one is one that I read as recently as last fall, I think. So it's A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book, it's so beaten up. It took me a long time to read because it's a really, really long book. But I got so wrapped up in this book. Like, when I started to read this book for the first little while, I was like, not super into it. But when I got into it really hard. And so every day I was waking up and thinking about this book, making breakfast and thinking about this book, and going to work and thinking about this book. Like, everything that I did, I could not stop thinking about this book. I just grew to be so intimately invested in the characters. It's like a sad, sad book. It's a proper sad book. And I almost hesitated to put this on this list because this book was really all-consuming when I read it, and I love it for that, and I love nothing more than to be completely wrapped up in a story. But there's a lot of controversy that followed this book. There's questions about representation of gay characters. There's questions when it comes to the ethics of writing a book with characters that so many bad things happen to. It almost ends up being like you're watching just a reel of horrible, horrible things. So basically this book just like kicks you and kicks you and kicks you. I know that there are a lot of problems with this book, and I don't want to downplay them. I think that they're important to know about and important to think about. But I also don't want to exclude it from the list, given that I don't think I've ever been more wrapped up in a story than I was with this book. And so proceed with caution, but it's also a story that you can become completely invested in. Side note, she went to the same college that I did. Next, I'm gonna kind of bundle these together, and these are my last in this genre. So these Murakami books, I've been working through all the Haruki Murakami books, and I love them. These two books absolutely have my heart. I was so grateful when I picked up this book. This is the first one that I read, and it's so beautiful. I picked these two off of my shelf, but honestly I could have picked any of them. Murakami has a way of writing that seems to really expose some truths or complications or conditions of living human life that are so hard to articulate that they usually just aren't. But he manages to do it with such grace and eloquence, but he doesn't beat around the bush. And so it's right to the point, but it's right to the like complicated, unusual, deep, interesting point. If you haven't read anything by him, I don't know what you're doing, honestly. Like, he's one of the most famous contemporary authors, and I highly, highly recommend that you pick up some of his books. Okay, now I'm going to talk about my favorite short story collections. Okay, the first one, which I don't have with me, is 99 Stories of God by Joy Williams, and I lent it to my mom, so I don't have a copy with me. I know 99 stories sounds really intimidating, but most of the stories are just like a paragraph or at most 2 short pages, and it's a really, really amazing book. They're kind of like bite-sized stories that touch on religion, that touch on God or the idea of God. There are religious themes, but it's not a short story collection about religion. And plus there were dogs on the cover. So my other favorite collection of short stories is Night at the Fiestas by Kirsten Valdez Quade, and this is a really, really excellent book. This is the book that really turned me on to short stories. It really made me see what short stories can do, and ever since then I read short stories all the time. It's kind of disconnected yet connected stories about a particular area in the southwest of the United States. There are just some incredible, incredible, striking images in this book that like still to this day, after like 2 years since I read it, I still cannot get out of my head. It's a truly incredible short story collection. Next, I'm going to talk about poetry, and I'm going to start with one that I've talked about on my channel before, so I'm not going to linger on it. Hard Child by Natalie Shapiro. I think that this is absolutely my favorite poetry collection that I've read in the past few years. It's really incredible. This is a great book, and it just came out last year, so yeah, it's good. It's good. Okay, next, Dog Songs by Mary Oliver. I love this book simply because it's poetry about dogs. Don't pick this book up if you're not okay with reading things that are sad and about dogs. There are some sad things about dogs in this poetry collection, but it's also just amazing. Next is another that I also feel is not spoken about enough here on BookTube. This is Nejma by Nayyirah Waheed. This is an incredible collection with a beautiful cover. The poetry is really short, really small, some of it is more prose-like, and she explores obviously themes of her own life, love, family, race, cultures. This is like a really great collection that I do not see getting its due here on YouTube. So if you love poetry, I highly recommend this one. Lastly, I'm going to talk about memoirs, and sadly I don't have any of the hard copies of the memoirs that I'm going to talk about. I've talked about Hunger by Roxane Gay in like every video since I read it, but I actually don't have it because I lent it to a friend. Seriously, Hunger is amazing. I'm not going to go too far into it. Hunger is an incredible memoir that I think everyone should read. The other memoir that I've read was Wild by Cheryl Strayed, and I know that I'm kind of late to the game on this one because it came out a while ago and then Reese Witherspoon started a movie based on it, but I mean for a good reason. It's an amazing memoir. It had me wanting to go back to work just so that I could continue reading it. So I highly doubt that there's anyone who doesn't know what it's about, but I'll give a brief thing anyway. It's about a woman who, after a divorce and some major changes in her life, trying to reform the way that she lives, she decides to embark on a months-long hiking trip on the Pacific Crest Trail. You really get an incredible full portrait of a human, and that's so uncommon and so special. And after I listened to that, I also listened to the collection of her advice columns, Tiny Beautiful Things, where she wrote as the columnist Sugar, and that is also an amazing book. And if you haven't read either of those, you should really pick them up. There are some really incredible truths about life and love in the world and family that can be found in those works. I think that that's one of the rare books. These books all make me feel, and that one especially, it makes me feel like I'm a better person having read it. Lastly, my favorite celebrity memoir is actually Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, which I listened to as an audiobook, and it's a long memoir, but really it's just such a good celebrity memoir. Like, it gives you everything that you could want in it. If you're a Springsteen fan of any kind, you should definitely pick it up. I've seen him twice in concert, and I've written a bunch of papers. I think one of the best papers I wrote in college was about Born in the USA, his album. It was so much fuller, so much more well-developed, and so much more dynamic and rounded out than you usually get with celebrity memoirs. I think that it's really good. And so if you like celebrity memoirs and you like Bruce Springsteen, you should definitely pick that up. This, I think, ended up being a long video, which I did not intend it to be. That's all I have for you with my favorite books of all time. If you have any videos about your favorite books of all time, I would love to watch it, so please let me know. Thanks for watching. Bye!